When I speak of the eyes, I do not merely refer to the organs that capture light and form images. I speak of them as ancient mirrors, as luminous gateways to the unspoken realm that lies beyond thought, beyond language, and beyond the conscious personality that you so carefully maintain. You have looked into another's eyes and felt the sudden tremor of recognition, as though something deeper than flesh and name stirred between you. This is no accident. The human eye, with its dark pupil and shifting glint of light, is a symbol of the self looking back upon itself, as if eternity borrowed a fragment of flesh to gaze upon its own mystery. When we talk of the unconscious, we often imagine a dark, hidden cave inside the mind, as if it were merely a forgotten attic filled with discarded memories. But the unconscious is not simply a place where things are stored. It is the living foundation of your soul's reality. It pulses beneath your every thought. It dreams through you, and it is always seeking expression, always seeking to be seen. The eyes, those quiet yet relentless flames of the psyche, are one of its chosen messengers. In them, the archetypes emerge, just as the moon reflects the sun's hidden fire. When you meet someone's gaze, and you feel that uncanny shock, what I have called the numinous, it is the archetype speaking through the fragile curtain of the ego, the unconscious soul is not content to remain silent forever. It speaks in dreams, in fantasies, in sudden waves of emotion that seem to have no rational cause, and yet, most directly, it is present when you look at another human being and realize that you are not merely seeing them, but you are being seen. This is why the gaze can be both terrifying and liberating. You fear it because you sense that you cannot hide your true self, your shadow, your wounds, and your secrets. But if you dare to hold that gaze, if you allow the mirror to show you what lies beneath, you discover something else, something like the eternal. The eyes reveal not only the conscious persona, but the archetypal figures that live within you. Think of the child's gaze, wide and innocent, brimming with the unbroken wholeness of being, or the gaze of the lover, burning with the projection of divine beauty onto the other, unaware that what is seen as divine is often the inner God image awakening within oneself. And think of the gaze of the elder, weary but luminous, as if life suffering has turned the soul transparent. Each of these gazes is not merely a stage of life, but a doorway into an archetypal reality. They remind us that what we call the soul is not an abstract concept, but a living, breathing energy that manifests in our very eyes. In the ancient world, people believed that the eyes emitted light. That vision was an act of the soul reaching out into the world, while modern science has shown that light enters the eyes. I find the old belief symbolically true. When you look at someone, you are not just receiving light. You are projecting your inner world, your unconscious patterns, your dreams and fears onto them. You are participating in a sacred exchange of psyches. This is why two people can look at the same object, the same face, and see entirely different realities. The eye is not passive. It is the mirror of the inner God or the inner demon, depending on what dwells in the unconscious. There is an old saying that the eyes never lie. I do not know if this is strictly true, but I know that they are harder to mask than words or gestures. Words belong to the intellect, to the surface layer of the psyche. The eyes belong to something deeper, to that subterranean part of you that still remembers the timeless, mythic patterns of existence. When a person speaks kindly but their gaze feels cold, you sense a split between their persona and their unconscious truth. The soul recognizes this split instantly. Your intuition, which is often your unconscious speaking to you, knows when the gaze and the words do not align. This is why the eyes are mirrors of the unconscious soul. They reflect what cannot be hidden. Even when the conscious mind tries to deceive, to understand the depth of this, we must remember that the human psyche is not just personal, it is collective. Your unconscious is not only the storehouse of your individual memories, but also the vast ocean of humanity's shared experience. I have called this the collective unconscious. Within it live the archetypes, those ancient patterns of perception and behavior that shape how you see and how you are seen. When you look into another's eyes, you are not only encountering their personal soul, you are also encountering the collective forces that both of you carry. The mother, the father, the lover, the trickster, the hero. All these figures may awaken in a single glance, sometimes without you realizing why you feel so moved or disturbed. The eyes are portals where these archetypes cross from the invisible into the visible. Think of the dream, where images and faces often carry a strange, otherworldly light. Dreams, like eyes, do not merely show, they reveal. In a dream, the gaze of another may feel unbearable, as if it sees through you. This is no different from waking life. When you encounter someone whose eyes unsettle you, it is often because they stir something dormant in your own unconscious. Perhaps they remind you of an ancient wound, or perhaps they carry the projection of an archetype you have yet to integrate. The eyes, like mirrors, reflect not only the other soul, but also your own shadow. The shadow, that part of you which you reject or deny, is often glimpsed in the eyes of another before you can face it within yourself. You may dislike someone's gaze because it carries qualities you fear in yourself: anger, vulnerability, desire, or shame. In this sense, the eyes of others serve as both mirrors and teachers. They show you the fragments of your soul that you have cast into darkness. And if you have the courage to look, you may retrieve those fragments piece by piece until you are more whole. The wholeness of the soul is not a simple brightness, as many imagine, but a unity of light and dark, conscious and unconscious, personal and archetypal. The eyes, in their stillness, seem to hold this paradox. The pupil, black and bottomless, is the night of the unconscious, the mystery of all that cannot be named. The iris, with its radiating lines, is like the sun's rays, unique, vibrant, a pattern of conscious identity. When you look at another's eyes, you are gazing into the meeting of these two worlds, the known and the unknown. This is why the gaze can feel like an abyss. It reminds you that you are more than your thoughts, more than your roles, more than your carefully constructed image. You are a mystery, and so is the other. There is an archetype I often speak of, the wise old man, or the sage, who appears in myths and dreams as the bearer of knowledge from the depths. His eyes are always remarkable. They seem to see beyond time, beyond appearances, as if they have witnessed the birth and death of countless forms. When you meet such a gaze in waking life, perhaps in an elder, a teacher, or even in a stranger, you feel something stir in your own depths. This stirring is the self, that archetype of totality, the center of your psyche, that is greater than your ego. It is calling you to remember who you are, to remember the unseen dimensions of your being. The eyes of the sage are not only his, they are your own, reflected back to you. I have spent much of my life exploring the unconscious, not to dominate it or explain it away, but to bring it into dialogue with consciousness. And I have learned that the gaze, the simple yet profound act of looking, is one of the most potent encounters between these two realms. To look deeply into another's eyes is to risk being transformed. It is to step beyond the safety of your ego and touch the archetypal forces that move you, often without your awareness. It is to awaken the myth that is living through you. Consider the lover's gaze once again. When two people are truly in love, they do not merely see each other, they see a reflection of their own soul, their own divine possibility in the other. This is why love can feel intoxicating, overwhelming, as though the universe itself has conspired to bring you home. But this projection of divine beauty is not the whole story. Sooner or later, the shadow appears. The same eyes that once seemed like the gates of heaven may now remind you of your own darkness, your fears, your unmet need. This is the test of love and of life itself. Can you see the whole person, not just the projection? Can you gaze into the other's eyes and still embrace what is real? Even when the archetype shifts, I do not speak of these things as abstractions. I speak as one who has witnessed the power of the gaze in the depths of analysis, where the patient and I would sometimes sit in silence, letting the unconscious speak through the eyes rather than words. There is something ancient in this silence, as if the soul recognizes that it is being seen, not judged, but simply seen, and in that seeing, healing begins. For to be seen is one of the greatest needs of the human soul. We spend so much of our lives hiding behind masks, afraid that if someone truly looked at us, they would see our unworthiness, our wounds, our confusion. But the truth is that the soul longs to be revealed, to be recognized in its totality, both light and shadow. The act of looking, of truly seeing, is a form of initiation. It requires that you step beyond superficial appearances and allow yourself to perceive what is alive beneath the surface. Most people look but do not see. Their gaze glances over the world like a stone skipping on water, touching only the reflections, never the depths. To see with the soul, you must slow down. You must let your gaze sink like a pebble into the water of being. until it reaches the still, quiet depths where truth resides. This is not a skill taught by modern society, which is obsessed with surfaces, with images, with the endless dance of persona and performance. Yet, without this deeper seeing, you remain estranged from your own unconscious, from the wellspring of life that moves through you. When I speak of seeing with the soul, I speak of a way of looking that is alive, participatory. It is not the cold gaze of judgment or analysis, but the warm, penetrating gaze of the heart. It is the gaze that recognizes the other not as an object, but as a living mystery. This kind of seeing is rare, for it requires vulnerability. It requires that you allow the unconscious to speak, both yours and the others. When you look into another's eyes and feel that unsettling mix of beauty and fear, it is because something in you knows you are standing on sacred ground. You are no longer separate. The unconscious flows between you like an underground river. This is why the eyes have played such a profound role in myth and religion. In ancient Egypt, the eye of Horus symbolized protection, healing, and the all-seeing power of the gods. In Hinduism, the third eye represents the awakening of inner vision, the capacity to see beyond illusion. In Christianity, there are countless references to the divine gaze, the eye of God that sees even into the hidden recesses of the heart. These symbols exist because humanity has always known that the eye is not merely biological but spiritual. It is a threshold between worlds. When you gaze into your own reflection long enough, as the mystics and shamans have done, you begin to perceive this threshold. And you realize that the one who looks back at you is not simply you, but something vaster, older, and infinitely mysterious. The unconscious soul speaks in images, in symbols, in living patterns. It does not speak in the linear, logical language of the ego. This is why dreams are so often filled with eyes watching, eyes glowing, eyes that seem to know more than you do. In my work with patients, I found that dreams featuring eyes often signaled a moment of deep transformation. It was as if the unconscious was saying, look here, pay attention. Something essential is being revealed. The dream eye is a messenger of the self, the archetype of wholeness that guides you toward integration. When you dream of eyes, you are dreaming of your own capacity to awaken, to see beyond the veil of ordinary consciousness. The gaze also plays a powerful role in the encounter with the shadow. Many of you avoid looking too deeply into the eyes of those you dislike, for fear of what you might find. But often, what you find in them is not their evil or malice, but your own projection. You see in them the traits you cannot accept in yourself. And so you turn away. This is a great tragedy, for the shadow cannot be integrated unless it is faced. And often, the only way to face it is through the mirror of another's gaze. Have you ever noticed how a single look from someone can pierce through your defenses, can make you feel exposed? That is the shadow being stirred, the unconscious soul calling you to remember what you have forgotten. If you can hold that gaze, if you can breathe and allow the discomfort to settle, you may discover that what you feared in them was a disowned part of yourself, waiting for your acceptance. To gaze deeply into the eyes of another is to recognize their humanity, but also their divinity. Every person you meet carries within them the image of God, the imago Dei, as I have called it. This image is not a dogmatic belief, but an archetypal truth. The spark of wholeness and creativity that lies at the center of every soul. When you see this spark in another's eyes, you are witnessing the self shining through, and something in you awakens in response, for the self recognizes itself in the mirror of the other. This is why moments of deep eye contact can feel almost unbearable in their intensity, because they awaken not only love but awe, not only attraction but the trembling awareness of the infinite. There are those who fear the gaze because they fear intimacy. They fear being known. To be seen is to risk being judged, being rejected, being found lacking. And yet, I tell you this, the true gaze, the gaze of the soul, does not judge. It does not measure you against the ideals of perfection that society imposes. It simply sees, it witnesses, and in that witnessing, there is healing. To look into the eyes of someone who sees you without judgment is to be reminded of your own inherent worth, your own divine essence. Such moments are rare, but they are life-changing. The unconscious often reveals itself through the eyes when words fail. Have you ever noticed how a person's eyes can suddenly fill with light when they speak of something they love, or how they can grow distant and dark when they are consumed by pain? These shifts are not random. They are the soul's language. The eyes speak what the mouth cannot. When someone's gaze drifts away while speaking, it is often the unconscious retreating, hiding, protecting itself. When someone stares with intensity, it may be the unconscious pushing forward, demanding to be acknowledged. If you learn to read the language of the eyes, you will find that they tell the truth long before words do. I've often thought that the gaze is a kind of alchemy. Just as the alchemist believed that base metals could be transformed into gold, the gaze has the power to transform the soul. When you look at another with genuine presence and openness, something shifts in both of you. You are no longer separate entities. There is a merging, a recognition of shared humanity, shared suffering, shared longing. This is the essence of empathy, and it is why true eye contact can be both healing and frightening. It requires that you let go of control, that you allow the unconscious to speak freely without censorship. The archetype of the lover is perhaps the most obvious expression of this. Lovers spend hours gazing into each other's eyes, not because they are trying to analyze each other, but because they are seeking the eternal. In the beloved's eyes, one sees the reflection of the divine, the unspoken promise that life is not meaningless. But even beyond romantic love, this archetypal gaze can be found in moments of deep connection between parent and child, between friends, even between strangers who meet by chance and recognize something familiar in each other. This recognition is not logical. It is the unconscious soul saying, here is another fragment of the great whole to which you belong. The eyes, as mirrors, also confront us with mortality. In the eyes of the dying, there is often a depth that words cannot reach. It is as if the veil between worlds has thinned, and through their gaze, you catch a glimpse of eternity. I have witnessed this many times. It is both humbling and terrifying. In that gaze, all masks fall away. There is no persona, no pretense. Only the raw truth of existence. To meet such a gaze is to be reminded that you, too, will return to the mystery from which you came. It is a call to live more fully, more authentically, for life is fleeting, and the soul longs to be known while it still walks this earth. In the practice of analysis, I often relied on the silent gaze as much as on dialogue. Words can obscure as much as they reveal, but the eyes tell their story, whether one wants them to or not. When a patient sat before me, speaking of trivial things, I would often watch their gaze, waiting for that moment when it softened or flickered or filled with tears. That was when the truth would begin to emerge, not because I forced it, but because the unconscious, when seen, begins to speak. It is like a child who hides in the shadows, but steps into the light when it feels safe. The gaze is that light. There is an undeniable mystery in the moment when two souls meet through the silent language of the eyes. It is not simply that we see the other person, it is that something in us is called forth, awakened, drawn out of the depths where it has slept for years. I have often said that the unconscious is not a mere repository of forgotten memories, but a living, breathing presence. When you look deeply into another's eyes, this presence stirs. It is as if two unconscious realms are brushing against each other, whispering ancient secrets in a language older than words. To truly encounter another through the gaze requires courage, for it strips away the masks of social convention. You can speak polite words, you can craft a charming smile, but when your eyes meet and hold, the truth emerges. It is in this silent exchange that the shadow often steps forward. The shadow which you tirelessly try to ignore is reflected back to you in the gaze of the other. Perhaps you see in their eyes the anger you repress, the longing you deny, or the vulnerability you fear to admit. This is why certain encounters are so unsettling. They awaken the parts of you that you thought were buried, but which are very much alive. The unconscious soul seeks wholeness, not perfection. And wholeness demands that you recognize and integrate your shadow. The eyes of others are like mirrors that help you do this. If you have the humility to look, to allow yourself to be seen without the armor of ego, you will begin to perceive not only who you are, but who you might become. This is not a comfortable process, but it is the path of individuation, the journey toward becoming your true self. Every deep gaze, every soul-to-soul encounter is a small initiation along this path. Have you ever noticed how children look at the world? Their eyes are wide, unfiltered, full of wonder. They do not yet carry the burden of persona, that carefully constructed mask we wear to fit into society. Their gaze is pure, direct, unafraid. When a child looks at you, it is as if they see everything, your joy, your sadness, your hidden wounds. And they do not judge, they simply see there is something profoundly healing about being seen in this way. It reminds you of a time when your own soul was unguarded, when you lived in the immediacy of being rather than the performance of life. As we grow, we learn to guard our gaze. We avert our eyes when we feel shame. We avoid looking too deeply at others for fear of what we might find. This is particularly true in modern life, where constant distraction has dulled our capacity for genuine seeing, but the unconscious has not changed. It still longs for that deep, wordless recognition. This is why moments of authentic eye contact can be so powerful. In those moments, the soul feels acknowledged, validated, even loved. I remember once working with a patient who had suffered great trauma. She could not speak of her pain. Every time she tried, her voice would falter, and she would retreat behind a mask of indifference. But when we sat in silence and I simply held her gaze, something shifted. Tears began to flow, not because of any words I had spoken, but because the soul recognizes when it is truly seen, that gaze, steady and unjudging, allowed her unconscious to rise to the surface, to express what could not yet be put into language. This is the power of the eyes. They can open the gates to healing when all else fails. The gaze also carries the archetype of the watcher, the seer, that ancient figure who observes and holds the truth. In myths, the watcher often appears as an owl, an all-seeing eye, or a silent guide. This archetype lives within each of us. When you look into another's eyes, you awaken this inner seer, that part of you that can witness without fear, without judgment. And when someone looks at you with this kind of awareness, you feel both exposed and liberated. It is as if the unconscious says, yes, this is who you are, all of you. And it is enough, but the gaze can also be dangerous. It can wound as easily as it heals. A cold, hard stare can pierce the heart, can make you feel invisible or judged. This is why we must cultivate a conscious way of seeing, one that acknowledges the power of the gaze. If you look at someone only through the lens of your projections, you do not see them. You see only your own fears and desires reflected back. But if you look with the openness of the self, with the willingness to encounter the mystery of the other, then the gaze becomes a bridge rather than a barrier. In many spiritual traditions, the practice of eye gazing is considered a sacred ritual. It is said that when two people look into each other's eyes without distraction, they begin to see not only the surface, but the soul beneath. Some even report that the face of the other dissolves, and what remains is a field of pure consciousness, a luminous presence that transcends individuality. This is not mere poetry. It is an experience of the self, that central archetype of wholeness that unites all opposites. Through the gaze, the boundaries of the ego soften. And you remember, if only for a moment, that you are not separate from the universe, nor from the other. In my own work, I have often been struck by how much can be communicated without words. A single glance can express love, fear, anger, or compassion more truthfully than 1,000 carefully chosen sentences. The unconscious speaks in images, and the eyes are perhaps its most immediate canvas. They are like living mandalas, patterns of light and darkness, color and depth through which the soul expresses itself. When you look into the eyes of someone you love, you are gazing into a living symbol of your own, longing for union, for completion, for home. And yet, we often avoid such gazes. We are afraid of being seen, not because we are unworthy, but because we sense that true seeing will change us. It will call us to step out of the shallow waters of persona and into the deep sea of authenticity. Most people are not ready for this. They prefer the comfort of masks, the safety of polite distance, but the soul does not thrive on distance. It thrives on connection, on that raw, unfiltered recognition that says, I see you, I know you, and I accept you. The deepest encounters of the soul are rarely spoken. They happen in silence, in the spaces where words cannot tread. A single glance can unlock 1,000 hidden doors within you. Doors you did not even know existed. It can summon memories long buried, awaken, desires you thought were gone, and bring to light fears that have been hiding in the shadows of your psyche. This is why the gaze feels so powerful and sometimes overwhelming, because it bypasses the intellect and strikes directly at the heart of the unconscious. When I studied patients who suffered from what we call neuroses, I found that they were often not truly seen, not by others, and not even by themselves. They lived behind carefully constructed masks, terrified that if they revealed their inner world, they would be rejected or abandoned. But when they were finally met by a gaze that was steady, compassionate, and unafraid, something profound began to unfold. The unconscious came alive. It was as if a hidden part of them whispered, at last, I can emerge. At last, I can be who I am. This is not only a therapeutic phenomenon, it is a universal truth. Every soul longs to be mirrored, not by flattery or shallow approval, but by a recognition of its true nature in relationships. The quality of your gaze speaks volumes. You may say, I love you. But if your eyes are cold, distracted, or burdened by unspoken resentment, the unconscious of the other will sense the contradiction. Likewise, even when no words are spoken, a single tender look can convey more love than an entire speech. The unconscious reads the eyes as easily as the conscious mind reads a book. It knows the difference between a gaze that manipulates and a gaze that sees. There is an archetype I have encountered in dreams and myths that I call the mirror. It is not a literal mirror, but a symbolic one, a figure or object that reflects the truth of the soul. The eyes function in this way. They are the mirrors of your inner life, showing not only what you wish to present, but also what lies beneath. When someone looks into your eyes and truly sees you, they are not just seeing your surface, they are seeing your archetypal landscape, your myths, your unresolved battles, your longing for meaning. This can feel like both a gift and a threat. A gift because you are recognized. A threat because you can no longer hide from yourself. I recall a dream that a patient once shared with me. In this dream, she was walking through a dark forest, lost and afraid. Suddenly, she encountered a figure cloaked in shadow, but the figure's eyes shone like two small suns. She said that when she looked into those eyes, she felt as if her entire life story was being read. Every pain, every joy, every forgotten hope, it was unbearable. And yet she could not look away. I told her that this dream was a message from her unconscious, urging her to face her own soul, to confront the truth she had long avoided. The eyes in her dream were not those of another person, but of the self. That center of wholeness within her. They were calling her home. The unconscious soul is vast and multidimensional. It holds the wisdom of countless generations, the myths of humanity, and the personal stories of your own life. When you dare to look into someone's eyes and see beyond the surface, you are touching this vastness. You are not just seeing them, you are seeing the collective journey of the human spirit. Perhaps this is why the eyes of elders often seem so profound. They have witnessed the dance of life and death, love and loss over many decades. Their gaze carries a depth that comes not from intellect alone, but from the accumulated wisdom of the unconscious. It is also why the eyes of infants feel so pure, almost otherworldly. They have just arrived from the mystery, untainted by the illusions of persona or the wounds of rejection. When a newborn stares at you, there is something in that gaze that feels eternal, as if they remember where they came from, and for a moment, so do you. The unconscious speaks through that gaze, reminding you of the unbroken wholeness that lies at the heart of existence. The gaze is not only an encounter with others, but also with yourself. There are times when you must dare to look into your own eyes, to hold your own reflection without flinching. This is not easy. Most people glance at their reflection without truly seeing. But if you look long enough, you begin to see not only your physical features, but the layers of your psyche, the child you once were, the shadow you have denied, for the dreams you still carry. You may even sense the archetypes stirring within you, as if your reflection were alive with ancient energies. This practice, though simple, can be transformative. It is a way of entering into dialogue with your own unconscious. Do not be surprised if, in such moments, you feel as though someone else is looking back at you. That someone is the self, the totality of who you are, which is always greater than the narrow ego. The ego is like the surface of the water, reflecting the light of day. The self is the deep ocean, dark and mysterious, filled with life and hidden treasures. When you meet your own gaze with sincerity, you are diving into that ocean. You are asking the unconscious to reveal its truth. The archetypes reveal themselves most vividly in these encounters. You may see the warrior in your own eyes, the one who has fought through life's battles and bears the scars of resilience. You may see the lover who longs for union and beauty. You may see the orphan who still feels abandoned by the world. Each of these figures is part of you, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be brought into harmony. The gaze is the bridge between these inner figures and the conscious mind. What is perhaps most striking is how the gaze can awaken the sacred. In many mystical traditions, to look into the eyes of a holy person is considered a blessing, a transmission of grace. But this is not limited to saints or sages. Every human being carries within them a spark of the divine, and when you meet someone with genuine openness, you are capable of recognizing that spark. This recognition can be life-changing. It can dissolve the illusion of separateness and remind you that all souls are connected in the great web of existence. There is something profoundly sacred about the way eyes can speak without a single word. When two beings meet in silence and allow their gaze to linger, there is a subtle exchange of energy, an invisible current flowing back and forth. It is not mere biology, it is Psyche speaking to Psyche, unconscious soul, touching unconscious soul. This exchange bypasses logic, it transcends the intellect, and it speaks directly to that place inside you that recognizes truth not by argument but by resonance. You know, when you have been truly seen, it strikes like lightning sudden, undeniable, illuminating everything in its path. I have observed that in those rare moments of true seeing, both the one who looks and the one who is looked upon are changed. Something is revealed, a layer of the persona falls away. You are no longer simply who you pretend to be, you are the living mystery itself. Both fragile and infinite. This is why lovers often describe their first moments of deep eye contact as if time stopped. In that instant, the unconscious wakes, the archetypes begin to move, and a great remembering takes place. You are not just two separate individuals, you are reflections of something eternal. Something that existed before you were born and will continue long after. The gaze also has the power to heal, not by fixing, but by accepting. When you look at someone with genuine presence, without trying to change or judge them, you create a space where their soul can breathe. Many wounds are inflicted because we feel unseen, misunderstood, invisible. But when you are truly seen, even for a brief moment, that wound begins to mend. It is as if the soul says, I exist, I matter, I am not alone. This is the alchemy of the gaze. It turns isolation into connection and fear into trust. But the gaze can also confront us with our own darkness. When you look into someone's eyes and feel discomfort, ask yourself, why are you seeing something in them that mirrors what you have not yet accepted in yourself? The unconscious often speaks in projections. You may look at someone and feel dislike or mistrust, but what you are really reacting to is an aspect of your own shadow that you have placed onto them. To realize this is a humbling experience. The eyes of the other become a mirror, showing you the parts of yourself you have disowned. If you can bear to hold that gaze, to face what it reflects, you may begin to reclaim those lost fragments of your own being. In the ancient traditions, mirrors were often seen as magical objects, capable of revealing hidden truths. The eyes function as living mirrors in exactly this way. They reveal what is hidden, not just in the other, but in yourself. When you meet a gaze that unsettles you, do not turn away too quickly. Instead, consider what it is awakening in you. Is it fear of vulnerability? Is it longing for connection that you have suppressed? Is it anger or grief? Or a memory that has been buried? These moments of discomfort are opportunities for growth. The soul uses the gaze to bring to light what the ego would rather keep in the dark. The process of individuation, the journey toward becoming your whole self, is deeply tied to this act of seeing and being seen. It is not enough to understand yourself intellectually. You must encounter yourself in all your light and shadow, as if looking into the bottomless depth of your own eyes. You must face the archetypes that live within you, the child who longs for safety, the hero who craves adventure, the sage who seeks wisdom, the shadow who hides in shame. Each of these figures will look back at you if you dare to gaze inward. And when you recognize them, you begin to integrate them, to bring them into harmony. Sometimes this inner gaze is best awakened through the presence of another. When someone looks at you with true compassion, they hold up a mirror to your own soul. They reflect back not only your wounds, but also your potential, your beauty, your divinity. This is why the gaze of a wise mentor, a true friend, or a loving partner can be so transformative. They see not only who you are, but who you could become. They see the self, that archetype of wholeness, shining through you even when you cannot see it yourself. The unconscious soul is always yearning for this recognition. It does not want to remain hidden forever. It wants to be known, to be brought into the light of consciousness. The eyes, with their strange blend of vulnerability and power, are one of the ways this happens. When you meet someone's gaze and neither of you looks away, you are saying, I acknowledge you, I see you as you are, not as I wish you to be. This act of acknowledgement is a form of love, a love that goes beyond romance or sentiment. It is the love of truth, the love of wholeness, the love that arises when the unconscious soul is finally recognized. In the end, the eyes remind us that we are all both observers and observed. Just as you look into the eyes of others, life looks back through them at you. There is a great mystery in this mutual gaze, as if the universe itself is using every pair of eyes to contemplate its own existence. When you look deeply enough, you may begin to sense that what you see in another's eyes is not just their soul, but the same essence that lives in you. You are gazing into the self, the eternal source, the mirror that contains all mirrors. So I ask you to look more deeply, not just at others, but at yourself, at the world, at life itself. Do not skim the surface. Do not be content with appearances. Let your gaze sink, like a stone falling into water, until it reaches the depths where truth resides. Dare to see and to be seen. Dare to allow the unconscious to speak through the silent language of the eyes, for in that seeing, you will discover that you are not alone. You have never been alone, and you are far more than the fragile mask you present to the world. You are a living soul, ancient and infinite. And your eyes, yes, your eyes are the proof.